The Giza Pyramids are the most studied ancient structures in the known world. These three enormous monuments on the western bank of the River Nile continue to excite and captivate us in the 21st century. But although for many their origins are mysterious, their age is not debated by scholars, yet it remains a subject that has long been challenged by many independent researchers. So how do we date the pyramids? How do we know who was responsible for their construction? Well, we have to look at the associated archaeology, we need to read the historical writings, but there are also scientific methods as well. In this video, I'm going to re-evaluate the science, re-examine the scientific methods that have been used to date the Giza Pyramids. By bringing this information back to the forefront of our minds, will the data finally end the debate, or could we be left with more questions than we started with? Well, strap yourself in because it's time to find out. Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe to the channel for regular content on ancient architecture, as well as all of the latest news from the world of archaeology. Some would say the rich archaeology of the Giza Plateau is more than enough to place the construction of the pyramids in the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. But what is the specific archaeology I'm referring to? Well, just looking at the Great Pyramid, and in 1935 Khufu's cartouche was found on the back of a casing stone. His cartouche and variants of it was scrawled a number of times in the relieving chambers above the king's chamber. And we also find it inscribed on stone slabs associated with the ancient causeway to the east of the pyramid. Panels showing the king's image have also been found, and of course the pyramid is surrounded by mastabas belonging to Khufu's family and closest advisors, even the tomb of his mother, Queen Hetepheres I. Khufu mud seals were also found in the identified pyramid quarries. The 4th dynasty papyrus known as the Diary of Mera talks of transporting large amounts of Chura limestone to Akhet Khufu. This was the ancient name of the Great Pyramid during the king's reign. Khufu's son and heir was Djedefre, and he would have led his father's funerary proceedings. Interestingly, his cartouche has been found in one of the Great Pyramid boat pits. So this all sounds like good solid evidence the Great Pyramid belongs to Khufu, it's logical and it does make sense, and there are also plenty of finds to relate the later two pyramids to Khafre and Menkaure. The problem though is that people will still say that this evidence is circumstantial. Yes, it shows the three kings were associated with the three pyramids, but according to some it's not evidence they built them, just that they reused them. Repurposed older structures. Therefore, we can't just look at the archaeological evidence alone. We should also take into account written historical sources. And what do we have? Well, Pharaoh Amenhotep II of the 18th dynasty attributed the monuments of Giza to Khufu and Khafre. This is written on a stele in his New Kingdom Sphinx temple. Furthermore, Prince Kenwezet of the 19th dynasty, son of Ramesses the Great, wrote about King Menkaure on the granite casing stones of the 3rd pyramid. The inventory stela, which is dated to the 26th dynasty, attributes the Great Pyramid to Khufu, and the same period wooden coffin that was found inside the 3rd pyramid mentions Menkaure by name. The grandfather of history, the Greek historian Herodotus, as well as Diodorus Siculus and the Egyptian priest Manetho, all mention the 4th dynasty kings as being responsible for the Giza Pyramids. So, whilst many will say that the archaeological evidence, together with the historical sources, is more than enough evidence to say that Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure were responsible for the Giza Pyramids, still not everyone agrees. They say the text-based information is not contemporary with the Old Kingdom, and yes, they were written hundreds and hundreds of years later, so how credible are they as sources? So what we're left with is scientific analysis and two methods of being used to date the pyramids of Giza. These are surface luminescence dating and radiocarbon dating. To my knowledge, in terms of Giza pyramids, only the Menkaure pyramid has undergone surface luminescence dating, and both the method and the results were published as recently as 2014. But what is surface luminescence dating? How does it work? Well, during the process of the preparation of stone blocks, and prior to setting one upon the other in the building process, solar radiation bleaches the stored geological luminescence on carved stone surfaces. The crystals like quartz and feldspar, which are the main components of the Menkaure pyramid granite casing stones, just a quick exposure to light will erase their luminescence to zero. When the rock is placed into position, the contact surfaces are shielded from the light, and so it's like a rock's surface has a preserved timestamp for when it was placed into position, when it was last exposed to the light. The science is far more complex than what I've just explained. How and why it occurs is probably too much for this video, but I've left some links in the description below. This scientific analysis was carried out on the Menkaure pyramid granite casing stones. I don't think anybody doubts that this stonework is original, and so surface luminescence testing should give us an indication for the pyramid's construction date. Here we can see the exact place the granite sample was obtained, on the eastern side of the pyramid where we find a flattened part of the casing stones. And so, the results. The date obtained was 3450 BC plus or minus 950 years. Yes, the error margins are enormous. And yes, you could use the data to argue the pyramid is much older than dynastic history, but you can also use it to argue the pyramid was built in the 4th dynasty. By itself, surface luminescence dating has not been all that helpful, and only one sample is never enough. There is no reason for anybody to question the methods the scientists use to take the measurement, but still, relying on one single sample is not enough for any scientific experiment. Therefore, we can't use the result from the Menkaure pyramid in isolation. Yes, it is contributing data to determine the age of the pyramids, but really that's it. Either way, it is something to consider, and the results tell us the Menkaure pyramid was built between 4400 BC and 2500 BC. That 1900 year window is enormous, but if nothing else, it does cast considerable doubt on the old idea that pyramids are more than 10,000 years old. So now we look to radiocarbon dating, but you may ask, how is that even possible? Because you can't radiocarbon date stone. And yes, of course that is correct, but none of the 4th dynasty Giza pyramids are made without mortar. I think there is a misconception that pyramids are just made from carefully stacked stone blocks, but this is certainly not the case. Mortar binds each structure together. It's found in abundance throughout each of the pyramid's core masonry, and anyone that's analysed the pyramids will tell you it's not part of a repair job because it's not localised in specific places. It's used all the way through the pyramids. It's a fundamental and original building material that was used by the pyramid builders. And yes, organic material is found inside the mortar. And yes, organic material can be radiocarbon dated. The organic matter is primarily charcoal, but also reeds, and it's very much part of the fabric of the mortar. It didn't somehow stick to it sometime after the pyramid was built. So, it is a fair assumption that if we can date the organic content of the original mortar, we can actually date the pyramids. In the early days of using the science of radiocarbon dating, the method was somewhat inaccurate, but thankfully it has improved over the decades. error margins have reduced significantly, and reference tables for different materials have been refined. The calibration of results has improved as more and more data is being added to the pool. Regarding the Giza Pyramids, the first radiocarbon tests were funded by the Edgar Cayce Foundation in 1984. In truth, they were hoping to prove the pyramids were in fact thousands of years older than dynastic history. 64 organic samples were collected from the mortar of the pyramids and their associated temples, and surprisingly for both Egyptologists and alternative researchers alike, the dates returned were neither the accepted dates for the 4th dynasty or thousands of years older. The dates average some 374 years older than the historical dates of the 4th dynasty kings. So, a second round of testing took place in 1995, this time funded by the controversial businessman David Koch, where more than 300 samples were taken from Old Kingdom pyramids, temples and mastabas. As well as the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure, the Step Pyramid, Maidum Pyramid, Ben Pyramid, Yusakaf Sahore, Unas, Teti and Pepi II pyramids, the unfinished pyramid of Abu Ruash and the mastaba of Shepseskaf were all tested. For the Great Pyramid, all but one date came from the charcoal in the mortar, and charcoal was also the source of organic matter from the Khafre and Menkaure pyramids. As we can see, once again the results for the pyramids did not line up with the 4th dynasty timeline, with the organic matter for the Giza pyramids being 200 to 500 years too old. There is one other radiocarbon date from the Great Pyramid we should also mention, and this comes from a piece of cedarwood that was retrieved from the Queen's Chamber northern shaft. Before Wayneman Dixon smashed through the northern wall of the Queen's Chamber in 1872, this shaft was actually sealed at both ends. Nothing had been inside or out of it since the pyramid was built, so the piece of wood must have been left during the construction process. After being lost for a number of decades, the wooden rod was rediscovered in 2020 at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, and yes, it was radiocarbon dated. But again, the date range was hundreds of years older than the 4th dynasty. The wooden rod was dated between 3341 and 3094 BC. So, all of the radiocarbon dates obtained from the Giza Pyramids are older than the 4th dynasty. But why? Well, we have to understand that when you radiocarbon date a piece of wood or charcoal, you are dating the age of a specific tree ring of the tree the sample came from. This means that if the wooden rod came from the centre of a 700-year-old Lebanese cedar tree, then yes, the wood could well have been used in the 4th dynasty, but the tree it comes from started growing hundreds of years earlier. Therefore, the date may seem anomalous, but it is easily explained, and maybe the source of all the charcoal used in the mortar was from old trees as well, or trees that started growing hundreds and hundreds of years earlier. The ancient Egyptian research associates believe the pyramid builders used old cultural material in their building projects, and so yes, this means we could be looking at old wood. Radiocarbon dating does not tell us when the wood or charcoal was last used, it only tells us the age of the tree it comes from, and specifically the age of the tree ring. They say on their website, quote, "Wood may lay around for centuries before being burned, especially in a dry climate like Egypt. Also, any living forest or stand of trees will have old trees with very young shoots. Any individual tree will have old parts, the inner rings, and very young parts, the outer rings and small branches." End quote. They continue by saying that giant stone pyramids in the early Old Kingdom may mark a major depletion of Egypt's exploitable wood. This may be the reason for the wide scatter and history-unfriendly radiocarbon dating results from the Old Kingdom. So yes, I guess that does all sound reasonable, that the wood was old, or that the trees that were used had been standing for a very long time, but there is also an alternative idea, a different explanation for the results. What if the timeline of the Old Kingdom is actually off by a couple of hundred years? Instead of reigning in the 26th century BC, what if Khufu, the man responsible for the Great Pyramid, actually reigned in the 28th century BC? What if the 4th dynasty and all of the Old Kingdom was earlier, and maybe the first intermediate period lasted much longer? I have mentioned this hypothesis in the past, and I'm not the first person to put forward the idea, and I'll mention it in far more detail in a future video. So, where does this leave us? Well, I think we can certainly rule out the idea that pyramids are thousands of years older than dynastic history, because right now there is zero evidence to support the claim. Furthermore, when interpreted a specific way, the radiocarbon dating and surface luminescence results can be used to support an Old Kingdom origin for the pyramids. And we have to remember, we shouldn't just look at the science in isolation, we always have to look at the big picture. We have to look at the scientific dating results together with the archaeological evidence and the historical sources. I can give you my own interpretation, and you can agree or completely disagree, and as always many will, because the reason doubt still remains in the subject of dating the pyramids is because more scientific work still needs to be done. Why haven't there been more surface luminescence tests on all three Giza pyramids? Why haven't even more organic samples been taken from the pyramid mortar to be radiocarbon dated since 1995? And the science has improved in the past 29 years, and so more needs to be done. We need to keep collating and refining data, because the more data we have the better, and it will bring us closer to really understanding the pyramids. My interpretation for the age of the pyramids, from looking at all of the available information and data, is yes, in my opinion, the three Giza pyramids were built by Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure in the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom, but I do think it's possible the timeline of the Old Kingdom may need refining. I think it could well be off by a couple of hundred years. But we can only find out if this really is the case by doing more radiocarbon dating and surface luminescence testing from as many different pyramids, temples and mastabas as possible. We need to keep building the database. But such work just isn't happening, and as far as I'm aware there's no plans. Scientific dating of the pyramids is a subject rarely discussed, and, in truth, the published results are almost forgotten. But maybe this is all by design, because it allows the debate regarding the age of the pyramids to linger. Maybe the authorities want to leave us with more questions than answers, because alternative history and ideas are very much a huge part of Egyptian tourism. Without the mysteries of the Giza pyramids, would so many people flock to the country every year to see them? Well, I have to say, I doubt it. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.